Thank you. So we're going to bring our panelists up here, and while they come up, I'll just briefly tell you who they are. So Philippe Johnston, he's the CIO and Departmental Security Officer, Social Sciences and Humanities Research Council, as well as the Natural Sciences Engineering Research Council. So that's a mouthful, and Phil will help make sense of what that actually means in a couple of minutes here. Michael Eubanks, CIO for LCBO. And where's Michael? There we go. Come on up. And Lee-Yow, CIO for the CA Club Group. Come on up. And then Bill Keyworth, who is Vice President of Research for IT Operational Excellence at IDC. So Bill's joining us from the US. So we got 3 CIOs here and a very accomplished researcher and expert on IT operational excellence. So we're going to lead this off with introductions. I'm going to let them all introduce themselves, their role, and what kind of transformation they have undergone inside their respective organizations. But before we do that, we're going to start with a little video, and this is a request from one of our panelists. It'll be very obvious from whom in a minute here, just to share some changes that we've seen over the years, and we can all, as Canadians, recognize this. So why don't we roll the video, please? Quite a transformation, digital and otherwise, over the years. So we'll get to that. But why don't we start here on the left with Phil? Why don't you introduce yourself? And maybe, where do you think your organization fits on that digital transformation spectrum that Tony talked about earlier, in terms of where you think you're at? And maybe talk a little bit about some of the projects that you're primarily driving forward with right now. And then we'll go along the row here.
Super. Can everyone hear me?
We're
mic's
good?
on? Okay.
All right.
Super. Okay. So I joined the 2 agencies that provide grants to the universities and the colleges. About $2.something billion worth of your tax dollars go back to the universities and the colleges to fund research in those areas. I joined them back in January 2017 as their CIO. And they had really, really, really great people. They had engaged people, but organizationally, the way the CIO shop was, and I don't know, maybe a raise of hands, like you kind of inherited like a disjointed pieces of people not knowing how to work all the puzzles together, whether it was information management, whether it was delivering technologies, or whether it was just application development or intake. So from a digital transformation perspective, if you're inheriting an organization like that, you can't all of a sudden say, well, I'm going to go do AI. The first things people, the vice presidents told me when I went and met with them was, we can't even get a laptop into their employees' hands, for example. We can't even properly manage how we're doing these grants and these programs. So I was kind of starting from very far, where there were so many things around I had to fix. Luckily, I had the greatest people. We have the greatest people. And so we had to look at how our client intake was. I looked at all of our systems, our applications, and everything was siloed and a mess. Our data standards, there was none. So back to trying to do anything, if you're going to do anything from a digital transformation perspective, if your data is all over the place, not standardized, it's very difficult to do so. So in terms of over the past year and a bit from a digital transformation perspective, we had to fix and get a business data management group, which I chaired, and I brought the business involved. I had to start to do small little projects, like even information management projects where they weren't using digital signature, they were using very manual processes. So I picked off a number of pieces across all of the CIO spectrum and created like a product roadmap with each of those leaders or managers or directors, got them motivated to try to do small improvements everywhere for our business and to actually deliver. So that's been pretty much how we did how I decided to put the digital transformation within our organization together. And so that is still very tactical, though. It's still very bare bones. But now we're starting. Now that we have the confidence of the business, I've developed the trust. I've created relationships, positive relationships with the VPs to just deliver on the bare bones minimum important pieces and start to elevate our maturity on those levels. Now we can start to talk about doing something like how do we improve the outcomes of the monies that we give across the country to the universities. Now I can start to have those conversations. But until that piece, and I still call that digital transformation, because if you're not going to do those basics well and figure out how you're going to make them successful for the VPs, and that's what was at the top of their mind at that time, it's very difficult to do those other things. So I would say to your answer, we're in the consideration stage, because now I'm bringing in some people to start to have the more higher level strategic discussions with the business to work on what the new way grants could be delivered, how they could be allocated, how they could be measured, et cetera, in the future. So we're just starting now that journey.
Yeah, no, that's great. Michael?
Great. Michael Eubanks again, CIO. I've been at the LCBO since 2014. I was brought in as part of a business transformation. I don't know how many folks are from Ontario. So, yeah. So with that said, for folks that have been in Ontario, you would have seen a lot of change as it relates to the business model. When I arrived at 2014, the business model had been stagnant for 50 years, and you saw in the video there wasn't much change. But I'll tell you, over the last 4 years, it's been tremendous. From the introduction of grocery now in Ontario, and grocers being allowed to sell beverage alcohol, as well as launching our .com channel back in 2016, to also now the recent introduction of cannabis. Our team, the IT team, has been challenged to help transform the business model and do it quickly. In some of the initiatives that I just mentioned, for example, the .com, we were challenged to put that up in less than 12 months. We were able to achieve that. For the launch of our wholesale channel, working with the grocers, we were challenged to do that in 9 weeks. And just the most recent, again, launch of cannabis, we were challenged to do that in 9 months. And all of those things were achieved on time and on budget. And a lot of that has to do with some of these new digital technologies that are available to us, primarily cloud. So, when I think about some of the technologies that we're all talking about here, we've seen how they have practically helped us to achieve some of those business goals.
That's fantastic. Ken, over to you.
My name is Ken Lee-Yow. I'm the CIO of CAA Club Group, and I'm not sure how many people actually know CAA as being a federation of companies. Because a lot of times when I joined CAA back in 2012, I thought it was one company. I said, great, it's one company. But when you get in there, it's actually multiple companies. At that time, we were 9 clubs, and we're now 8 clubs. So CAA Club Group is actually the largest club in Canada. And on top of that, it's not just roadside. You know, everybody knows CAA as the company that tow the truck, has a tow truck, and will tow you when you're in trouble. But CAA also has home and auto insurance. We do our own underwriting. We also have travel medical insurance. So when I joined in 2012, we actually put a plan in place for 5 years where we would actually totally change all the technology in the organization. In 2012, we created our own travel medical insurance company. So we had to put a system in place. We changed our home and auto insurance system. That was all the way done in 2012, all the way to every single system that existed in the organization, whether it's a network, whether it's a servers, whether it's the printers. When we talk about printers, that's where I met Tony. We talk about the follow me printers stuff. Desktop, changing all that piece. But the core component of it was our emergency roadside. And people would tell me that, you know what, we would not be able to change it because for the past 25 years, this system has been around. And for the last 10 years, CAA has been trying to change the system, and it has never happened. So I say, you know what, I'm on a journey, we're going to make the change. So last year, we actually changed our roadside as well. And we also got SAP implemented. So at the end of 5 years, we've basically replaced every single system in the organization. The only system that we haven't replaced has been our HR system. And what we've done is we've only upgraded it, right? So if you want to look at the spectrum where we are, we've actually replaced everything. But now that we've replaced a lot of these systems, we actually have data. And data is actually king. And we have one single mission in our organization. When we talk about making money and all that stuff, it's actually not making money. And our piece is, our mission is to be obsessed with member safety. And that obsession with the member safety actually drove us to actually create another application, which is about more about artificial intelligence. And it's really about the piece that say, you know what if we can actually be there before somebody has a breakdown on the highway? Right? Because if it takes me an hour or 2 hours to actually get to you, you're stranded. I don't know how many people, show of hands, how many people have been stranded on the highway before? It's not a fun place to be. Right? Every minute's actually count. So if we can actually get our tow truck to be closer to those events, it will actually help. Right? From that purpose, we've actually built that tool to actually start positioning our trucks closer to where the incidents are happening. And all that stuff is based on the data sets that we have and also weather information that we gather. We actually predict our own traffic as well. So it has been in place now for a year. We've been iterating it through quite a bit. Just this past Sunday, not this past Sunday now, it's like 1 week ago, we've actually found that the tool was being able to actually find the higher priority incident. So the baby locked in the car, and we've had that situation where now it took us literally just 11 minutes to actually get there. And again, being stuck on the highway, having a child in the car. I still don't understand why people lock their kids in the car. But that's a whole different story. But you know, getting there in 11 minutes actually is incredible. And again, we have 2.3 million members in our territory. And as all of you guys know, there is no one single truck for every single person because it's not feasible at all. So how do we optimize the truck that we have to actually position it that way? That's the key component. So we've now evolved from the piece, we've transformed everything, but we're still on a journey to sort of say, how do we make things better? How do we keep being obsessed with our members? That's what we've done from a roadside standpoint. We've also have another piece where, from an insurance standpoint, we've actually, the first company to actually have a product called CMI Pace, which is really changing the way that the industry looks at insurance. Instead of charging you on a whole annual basis to whether you drive your car or not, we actually are charging you based on how much kilometers you actually are driving. So it's a pay-as-you-go component. We launched that in July.
Yeah, that's super interesting. We'll come back to that. Bill?
I'm trying to figure out why I'm sitting here. But my experience starts many decades ago. I was on staff for telecom, IT staff for telecom, moved into data networking, and eventually found myself working at Gartner Group and initiating their first network and system management service in the mid-90s. And I was shocked. This isn't negative about Gartner Group, it's a statement about our industry at the time. I had a great experience at Gartner Group, but the thing that happened to me was I'd be sitting in this meeting and these vendors would come in and be talking about this great stuff associated with what we called second platform. And I'd raise my hand and say, well, what are you doing to manage it, control it, monitor it? I mean, things that IT does. And that was always, oh, well, and they start to stutter and go, well, we'll do that in the second version. And I kind of at that time went in a state of shock that this whole industry was delivering stuff that couldn't even be managed. That's how I went into IT operational excellence, was that kind of focus. I will say that what's happening now is it is the most exciting time to be involved with technology that has ever been. And as an example of what they've talked about, we're all playing by new rules. And when you play by new rules, there are new winners. There are new bullies. There are new everything. And the rules have changed in the game. One of the things that I research a lot about has to deal with metrics. And I'll just finish with the statement that in order to accomplish the business objectives that these individuals are expressing, you have to put in metrics that identify business outcomes from an IT perspective. And if you can't make that connection, if you can't move from a traditional IT efficiency, performance, availability mindset into what do I do and how do I show what I do hits the business outcomes that these individuals were talking about. That's, to me, a new rule. Mm-hmm. So anyway, that's...
Yeah, that's fascinating. So, and Bill will be actually leading us off tomorrow morning in terms of operational and talking about specific KPIs and how those are evolving and where you need to be focusing tomorrow. So we'll come back to that. So my first question, I thought, Michael, you mentioned that cloud, you felt was one of those enabling core technologies that you've deployed to help drive the transformation. Maybe you want to just expand a little bit on how you see cloud as the core piece and your experience in deploying it, obstacles, things you've learned along the way that would benefit others.
Yeah, so cloud is just one of many, enablers, but I will share a couple of examples. Currently, as I mentioned before, we just stood up a new business, Ontario Cannabis Store. And it was our team, my team, that provided the shared service to stand it up. And cloud and cloud services, cloud providers was key in all aspects of that. When I think about the timeline and the complexities, and again, standing up a new business with all of the retail domains that are required to do it, it was key. I would tell you that if we were challenged to do this, maybe 3-4 years ago, it may not have made sense, only because for many of us that live in Canada, the biggest issue is, data residency. Mm-hmm. And, I think when you think about a lot of the cloud providers, many of them were not here. Right. And that became an issue and a barrier. And that's no longer an issue and a barrier, so that's been very helpful. But with that said, what comes with these new relationships is kind of this delineation between roles and responsibilities. And as you provide and ask someone to now be accountable on your behalf, you need to make sure you've got some checks and balances in place. And we've now kicked off different teams that are really responsible for what we call the vendor management component of some of the cloud providers to ensure some of the security, for sure the security, mm-hmm. As well as the governance is in place. And I would say in doing so, those are not the same people that were hands-on keyboards, doing the coding and the programming themselves. Right. So that comes with certainly a culture change as it relates to managing these vendors and making sure that they're accountable for some of the services that you've just now assigned to them.
And from a KPI point of view, have you seen changes in that as well as a result?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it's, service levels. Service levels are very important, but one of the things that I've discovered over the last couple of years, it is a challenge for our folks that have normally used to hands-on keyboards and managing a third party once removed. When you've got a cloud provider or someone providing you services, it should be a black box. right? I'm just managing to the service levels. I shouldn't care, how you stood up, the farm and what's in it. It shouldn't matter to me. I've found over the last couple of years that that's been a struggle for some of our folks, especially when there are issues or outages, but they're getting better at it. So the KPI is primarily service levels.
Yeah, excellent. Ken or Phil, comments on, are you using cloud yet, Phil? What are your thoughts?
Well, we're with the Government of Canada. They put out their omnibus unclassified cloud contract. I think it was it took them a long time, but 8-9 months ago that did come out for us to be able to leverage. And then what's more important, more useful for us is from a security perspective, like we hold lots of data on Canadians, and we give that label a protected B label, which means it needs to be secured to a higher level than just on unclassified cloud. So what's really helpful for probably all of Canada and definitely for the Government of Canada is that hopefully in the next 7 or 8 months, that big omnibus protected B cloud will be there. Then that becomes a lot more, like the contract itself will be there. And then, it'll be Amazon, it'll be Microsoft, it'll be, it'll be everybody though, and you can decide where you want to go. But the point being, now I can do the whole stack, like on the cloud. Whereas, if I'm just doing test and dev on the unclassified cloud and then I have to ship it into my infrastructure, it's just not as much value as if I have everything. I can do everything on one stack, on one spot. So we're waiting for that, but we've dabbled and done, Dynamics Online. We've done a lot of Azure stuff, Office 365, et cetera. And, surprisingly enough, it was about 1.5 years ago, we are still using tape backups. I don't know who's got tapes still on their premises, but I went into the data center, our data center, and I said, "Are you guys still using tapes?" Yeah, and it was like at least half a person a week having to manage these tapes. So I said, we can do better than that. We definitely, like that's what I was talking about, like these little pillars. If you deep dive, and I think it was said in your digital transformation, and you look at your organization and you deep dive, you can always find ways that you can make things better. So in this particular case, I said, we're not doing that anymore. We're going to ship them off to the cloud, encrypted. So if they're encrypted on the cloud, then no one can, and we hold the key, no one can decrypt it and look at your data. And so, well, we had to get the Communication Security Establishment involved. We had to get Shared Services Canada involved. We had to get Treasury Board. So anyhow, it took us about 5-6 months to put this whole business case together. But, perseverance, resilience. Now we ended up using, I'll say the vendor, we ended up using Amazon because they had the Snowball. I don't know if you've heard of the Snowball, but we ended up using them because Microsoft, when we wanted to try to use them, it would take them 7 or 8 days to get the first backup done. And by that time, I had another terabyte of data that I had to back up, and so I would never ever catch up. I'd never actually do a backup. So Microsoft actually, they're happy that they work with us because now they've brought the equipment to do that in Canada. So you can go to Microsoft now. They've now decided that, hey, there's a business case here to put all the backups. And now we got rid of tape backups. I saved half a person a week of effort, and they can be doing something else that's more important than managing tapes. So that's where we are, Government of Canada and ourselves, and we will be moving to the cloud as soon as that protected B contract is out.
I just wanted to bring out this concept of new rules. Is when you talk about cloud services, we've introduced into our environments somebody that knows how to price on consumption. And that is now an expectation of the IT organization. You realize how much IT is controlled with the money coming from the line of business. And you talk about innovation. Where do a lot of those innovation projects come from? They come from line of business opportunities, and they know what they're paying for. And the new rules that are being played is the fact that our corporate finance CFOs, if I have a bone to pick, have done decades of damage to us by forcing us to allocate costs by revenue or by employee or something, where the new model coming from the cloud service providers is very much focused on pricing on consumption. And it's part of what I'm hearing you describe. You've accommodated to your users.
And I'd only add quickly, Bill, I mean, that's a positive thing, but here's the challenge for us as CIOs. When I think and work with my CFO regarding the consumption, it's immediate. In the past, we'd have these capital budgets get depreciated over 5 years. It's a lot easier to handle on the balance sheet. Now I've got direct impact in year for P&Ls. And one of the things that we see is that the business is challenged, because as we're trying to deploy things sooner, quicker, faster within 12 months, I've got a project X million dollars, that's going to come out of the operating budget in that year. So you've got to be able, if you're the business owner, to see what's going to happen on the top line to cover that off. That's kind of the pros and cons as it relates to this consumption model.
That's the new rules, and you're living it. And that's, I don't want to say it's been dumped on you. It's kind of opened up that opportunity to have an OpEx experience versus a CapEx, which is how we've been handled previously. Great example.
Any questions? All right. We'll start in the back here and then work our way to the front.
Thank you. Thank you very much. So for all the panelists or anyone who'd like to answer, I'd be interested in what you're doing within your IT areas as you're looking at what kind of operating model and how you're shifting the workforce to reflect or to respond to the demographic changes in Canada. We're changing now, and its workforce is changing. And so is inclusivity and diversity on your radar? Is it becoming a strategic imperative to how you set up and structure, recruit a workforce to deliver on your business?
Yeah. Anybody want to take a lead
questions.
on it? Yeah, so Ken, you want to talk about how you're dealing with this?
In terms of demographics, I mean, in our case, I mean, for me, it's really about always hiring people based on skills and aptitude, irregardless of gender, color, any of the other pieces. Because at the end of the day, the people who actually have the right pieces will actually come and work together. I mean, you can be really smart as well, but then be a troublemaker somewhere else, then you don't want that to be part of the team. We are actually quite diverse in our environment. Even our senior executive teams were actually very diverse, both from ethnicity standpoint, from a gender standpoint, we're very diverse. I actually got 2 colleagues here who work for me, and they are different backgrounds. We tend to celebrate that, but at the end of the day, it's really skill sets. Trying to attract younger people into the organization is also key. But our biggest challenge is to say, you know what, CAA is more than just a tow truck organization, because my child even tells me, so do you get to drive the truck? I said, no, but that's the association that people have. So for us, it's hard, but we try to attract younger people. We would go to university, we talk to them. So that's from my side.
So I would say that we try to reflect our community, whether it's in our stores or in our head office, and I think we do a pretty good job at that. Just to build on what Ken was saying, one of our challenges is really getting to the young people, and I would probably guess that all of our organizations struggle as it relates to competing against the Googles and the Microsofts to get some of those young folks. One of the things that we've been able to do effectively over the last couple of years is we've got an innovation lab in Communitech in Waterloo. And that presence has done a lot as it relates to sharing and explaining just what we do as a retailer and the various opportunities that many of the young people would have. And one of the things that we're really proud of over the last couple of years is when we think about young applicants, we now rank right up there with the Googles and Microsofts as it relates to applicants and folks looking for an opportunity with the LCBO. So as it relates to diversity, I think that's what we try and do. As it relates to structure, what we've tried to do based on the growth that I just talked about, whether or not it's wholesale, the digital channel, and now the shared service being provided to the new cannabis business, is to really delineate between support and enabling. One of the things that we're all challenged with is, the business appetite never changes. It is nonstop. I need more for less. And one of the things that we've done over the last couple of years is to really make that delineation between support and enabling. We had found that too many people were wearing too many hats. In our business, that there's always fires to fight, and that's what folks would gravitate to. So this separation between those functions has been very effective for us. And the other thing that we've also, I would say, accepted is that, you know, technology is very pervasive now, and you're going to have technologists in marketing. You're going to have technologists in your supply chain. And what we've tried to do is kind of govern but share that responsibility, and we think that's been very effective, especially when we think about the digital channel and the online channel. Having our partners in marketing, you know, take on some of those product roles that would be traditionally in IT, and having it there but governed has been very successful for us.
Phil, you want to comment on how easy it is to recruit for the government?
I'll echo a lot of what Ken mentioned in terms of, in terms of hiring. We use co-op programs in the government quite a bit, and they're invaluable. They bring new blood, energy, and enthusiasm. And you know, my rule is pretty simple for if I tell them this, if they want to stay on, you know, show up to the work, pretty simple. Do your job and get along with people. If you do those three things, generally speaking, you're going to be liked and you're going to have an opportunity here. And generally speaking, we're pretty successful in providing them opportunities if they meet those minimum criteria. There's a push these days, and I'm not too sure if it's the same across all of your organizations, but there's been a significant decrease in the amount of women participating in IT. Like it peaked out about 10 or something years ago. So within our organization and within the Government of Canada, there's definitely a push to try to create better environments for women in the IT world, like all things being equal, hiring more women if we can. So I would say that that's the only piece that is different than what people have just mentioned here, and that's been pretty public in terms of the broadcast of what the Government of Canada wants to do. So.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, that's. I think we had another question here at the front, or.
Yeah, I don't know if I need a mic. But anyway, previously, before the last question, you're talking a lot about cloud adoption, and if you remember from my previous question, I'm from Griffin Secure, and I have a lot of years' experience in a security mindset. My mind's still blown. Backups in the cloud, they're encrypted, but you don't own or control the data. But there's a new business model that you're talking about that you need to consider. And so, coming from you, I'm asking to have an opportunity, the drive to adopt cloud. Is it strictly the cost savings? I'm kind of almost hearing it as a subtlety, but maybe not.
Actually, I don't know who's done the numbers. I've done a few numbers. To just get infrastructure as a service, we've talked to Amazon, we've talked to Microsoft, and I want to move my whole test and dev environment in the cloud, and I just want infrastructure. So just give me infrastructure that I can put up and down. And I can buy the equivalent infrastructure for $400,000, let's say, and that lasts me 5 years. And they were going to charge me $180 per year for the same thing. So it's actually not cost effective. Like I can just buy it and put it in and manage it myself. You know, sure there's some employee costs around like managing the environment and the networking, but I still needed the full production environment networking anyhow, so it didn't change anything. Where I think it's going to make sense to be on the cloud is for software as a service. That's where you get everything up the stack, and now it becomes, you know, a license, and you don't have to, you know, it's much easier that way. I think that's where we're going to go. We're going to go like Dynamics Online if we're going to use, you know, CRM, for example. We're going to use Office 365. It's the service that's going to end up being much cheaper than if you add servers, then the licensing, then the management, then the configuration, then the patching. If you do that whole, that's where it becomes a business case. And from a security perspective, obviously, you know, the Government of Canada is putting in place rigid contracts and controls and mitigation with the providers to make sure that the data of Canadians will be protected, and you know, because we're going to use those services to deliver services to you.
Just to add specifically, it's interesting to see that these providers like Microsoft, Amazon are now having more Canadian-centric offerings, which was one of my first problems with the cloud adoption. It's like our data is no longer in our country.
Right.
But okay, thank you. Thank you.
I didn't answer the question about the cloud before. So
Yes.
For CAA, for in our case, we've been very, very careful about the cloud adoption. I agree with the piece about if I'm just have servers here, I'm going to take these servers and put it in the cloud. It's useless, in my viewpoint. The piece where it makes sense is really, again, it's about services. How do I, when I talk about using services, I'll give you an example. If I were to set up a contact center, a whole telephony platform, it would take at least 12 months to buy, set up. I can now do that in Amazon in 15 minutes. That's services.
Yeah.
And that's where we'll talk about using it. And we use services for like a Google map. We use weather information. Those are services, not just the fact of taking the stuff out there. But we're very, very strict about our data as well. So.
And I agree. Exactly. This is about services. It was interesting. There was a stat earlier that talked about cloud and cloud adoption as it pertains to a cost play. Again, I don't see that. If anything, it's going to be more. If you're doing it and it's going to be more, it's usually because you treat it as a commodity and you don't want to be in that business. I'm a retailer. I'm not looking for building data farms. So it is definitely for services.
So we hear the speed matters, right? Speed matters. So if speed matters, and then we're talking about developing new, standing up new services, new businesses, etc. One of the big trends in the marketplace in order to drive speed is agile development. So maybe we could start with Bill. From your point of view, what would be your comments around agile as a method to speed up things within your organizations? What do you see as a strong point?
Are you talking to Phil or Bill?
Oh, sorry, let's start with you, Bill.
This one down at the end. All right.
Yeah. So from your point of view, looking at metrics, methods, and so forth, what would be your comments around agile? And then maybe we can go to Ken and Michael and Phil in terms of your experience with implementing agile in your organizations, if you have done that.
2 points. Agile means two things. We hear people want to be agile, they want speed, they want to be able to enable experimentation. Those are business discussion. There's business reasons behind moving that. And then you have a discussion about moving to agile versus waterfall. And I think it's dangerous to just assume that if you go with agile versus waterfall, you're going to be agile, speedy, and enable experimentation. I'm not saying you can't be, but the goal is to do the three. I want to do this faster. I mean, each one of you have mentioned that. I want to be able to experiment, and I want to be able to fail fast, and agility is maybe the better word for it. I want to move to that. Agile versus waterfall, without any question, and all of our studies have demonstrated how effective that is. And waterfall is almost an environment of a legacy that can't move you, and it's preventing innovation. So I'd be interested in what they say they're experiencing.
Who wants to go first? Go ahead.
Yeah, go ahead.
In our case, this stuff is falling apart. I agree with you in terms of there's the mentality of being agile, and then from a development standpoint, there's the agile development methodology versus the waterfall methodology. We tend to look at it and say, yes, we are agile, but the reality is when I look at it, it's a mixture of both of them, which I think there's a term called wagile, right, has been talked about. But because from a business standpoint, if you're pure agile, you just say, I got X number of money, go find something, develop this. I don't know how many people can actually make business case out of that component. So we do have to set a certain criteria to say, this is what I want to get. So we do adopt a fair bit of the agile development environment. So yes, we have sprints. Yes, we do the demo. Yes, we do have people from a business and IT working together to do the user stories, do the testing. At the end of them, do the demo, and then create the next user stories for the next iteration. We set ourselves up for about 7 to 9 sprints, depending on the projects. Sometimes it's smaller sprint, whether the sprint is a month or the sprint is a week. So because of that component, we've been able to move in our environment quite quickly. Like during the 5 years of change, that's what we did. Talk agile development to SAP. I don't know how many people have implemented SAP, but if you do agile in SAP, it doesn't work that way. So you have to modify it. But we still approach it the same way. So say, you know what, let's do little sprints. Let's see what happens. That's how we've been able to do it. But it's different. I don't have yet to, somebody says from corporation standpoint, says, we are fully 100% agile, pure agile. I haven't seen it.
Yeah, just to build on what Ken said, I totally agree. I mean, we run a hybrid. I think, you know, the introduction of Agile was just another thing that you could add to the toolbox as it relates to a methodology to develop software and implement projects. But for us, there's not one or the other. I challenge the teams to take the best of both and apply it to whatever project or client group that they're working with, because what we understand is, you know, sometimes you've got certain projects that require, you know, a rigidness to ensure that things happen, usually upgrades. And then you've got folks that are working on the digital side that really, you know, need those user stories and the scrums and the things to iterate to understand, you know, what's possible. But we, you know, expect our people to be able to determine, you know, what's the best, you know, tools from each methodology that will make you successful. And I think that's been helpful over the last couple of years for sure.
Yeah, I would agree. We implemented this about 6, 7 months, 8 months after I arrived. So it meant changing, first of all, it meant a lot of training for both the business and ourselves to try to figure out how we would implement it, how we would get the most out of agile methodologies. And also, you know, we inherited, like I would call it a spaghetti mess of our systems. And so going agile without like an enterprise view or an enterprise architecture view could have just made that problem even worse. So we had to, at the same time, bring in architecture, sound configuration control boards, like embedded in the agile way of doing things. So we just weren't like showing something to a client, oh, we really, really love that, but the database or the standards were totally messed up, and we could never integrate with something else. So we had to, like, back to what everyone said here is, you know, you got to bring in agile in a way that you're not going to create more problems and silos in the future for yourself. And so we've had to live through that over the last year. It's worked out extremely well and allowing us to deliver now. We were asked in June, July to deliver something very quickly. We've been using the agile processes with the back end, you know, configuration processes, and we're going to be delivering it in December. So I'm very proud of that. And this is adding brand new programs that they want to put in place to deliver within Canada.
Yes,
I just want to add, it's interesting we got through that whole discussion and didn't use the word DevOps. And I think one of the handicaps of Agile is the ability to get the operations, when you throw it over the wall, that they can get through quality control and testing and implementation, et cetera. And it's another aspect of being agile, speedy, and experimenting. That's the one that's getting more inquiries or press to us, is that discussion around DevOps. It takes it to the step of, we got to get this into an at-scale operations environment. And that implication was through every one of the answers.
Questions for the panel?
Hi, I'm Sandeep from CIBC. The question was about agile, and I kind of heard the word agile, which is what most of the organizations are currently doing. But has any of you actually looked at the way that whether we can convert our organization itself around to be agile? So current organization, most of the organizations which are basically set up way back in 1950s, 1960s, continue on, they are set up to be waterfall organizations. They are not set up to be agile. The reason for this is just, for example, if you want to do an agile program, the person who is responsible for both business and technology part of it if you want to do a technology. Whereas most of the organizations currently are set up is saying, I have a business part and there is a technology part, and they both try to work together with shared responsibilities. Agile would usually not work that way. It would usually work between where I have one person responsible who has the funding, who says this is what I need to be done, goes forward and get it done. He's able to track it out to say, I spent so much money, it doesn't work out that way. Should I take it back? Should I stop this project? I've learned enough. But that kind of organization is like CIBC itself is not set up that way. I'm sure a lot of these organizations are not set up that way.
Right.
Has anyone actually looked into this to say, can we set up the organization that will support Agile and see how we can move forward?
Maybe, Bill, you want to talk about organizing IT around products as maybe one way of
Yeah, that's a real
addressing
hot
that?
button of mine. I'm going to be talking about it tomorrow in the presentation when using an example of Ford. But one of the new aspects of that we see in people that are thriving in the digital transformation environment is they're moving from a project orientation where the goal is to get the job on budget and on time, and moving into a product orientation where there's a business case, there's a life cycle discussion, there's accountability, there's in addition to the projects. And it's almost, I don't want to say it's 100%, but it's really up there. All of a sudden you identify these thriving people in the surveys and you throw in the question about product management, it's there. And it's a different way of looking at it. And it's trying to step up to the, I think the agile development on the concept of product owner moved that discussion into IT. And it's taking hold. So.
Any comments from rest of the panel?
I totally agree. Even within your IT organizations, like I think for a while was run, grow, transform, or I think that was so you had somebody who was running and something was, and then all the cool people did transforming stuff, right? That didn't work. That really, I never thought that could work because most humans want to be able to do, own something, be the product owner. Like if you're the product owner and you're accountable, that was the word. So, you know, within my organization, I switched, I got rid of that run, grow, transform because I wanted the person who was in engineering for, let's say, the image of the laptops, you own it. What are we going to do? How are we going to do collaboration? So now we start talking about functionality and outputs, not about necessarily the technology, but you own the products that are going to enable those outcomes for the business. And so within my organization, we switched it and gave those people those roles. And it completely changed people's motivation levels, enthusiasm. They felt like they owned something. And not only that, they started to work with the business hand in hand about what capabilities and outcomes they could be producing. And so is that agile? Is that, is that product management?
It's the right thing to do.
I think it led to a lot of those, like you said, digital transformations in those silos within my organization across all the aspects of IT. So I totally agree with that approach.
So Bill will talk more about that tomorrow morning. It's a super important topic. I think we're going to take our last question now from the audience because I think we're out of time. And down here we got a question.
Hey, Mark, McGinnis Cooper Law. At the risk of going back to a question you just booted, Phil, I'm just curious, we took that similar approach with sort of product owners, and we ran into an issue with there being basically too many products for people to effectively own and innovate in through. How did you deal with that?
I don't have many products. I don't know. We had to prioritize which products were going to be important to us. I had to have discussions with the business, my boss, like which things we wanted to focus on. But you have analytics, business intelligence. That's a whole set of products. You have our systems, our software systems, our applications. That's a whole set of the front office. So I split it up between front and back office. That was an easy way to make it simple for us. So you had the back office systems application owners, and you had the front office business application owners, and then you had the infrastructure type people. You had the information management. So each of those areas, they became automatically the product owners, and they grew and transformed those areas. And in doing so, when we looked at our budgets, when I know I'm in government, I would associate costs to services. And I was very transparent about what it cost me to do what. And I told the business, and we set up annual 6-month meetings, and I'd show them how much it would cost to do. And then they would start to say, I don't want to spend money here. I'd like to spend money here. I can do that for you, but are you okay to live with a bit less services or a little less value over here? And so that enabled, along with the business, you had to bring the business in when you were going to go to product management, because each of those product owners had to work with business people in terms of the outcomes and the functionalities they want to deliver. So, it's still a struggle, but if you're open and transparent with the business, you can figure out where you want to put your costs.
So one final question, which I think I'm going to put to Ken and Michael here. So Ken talked at an earlier conversation we had, he talked about the transformation in terms of implementing and deploying AI inside CAA. And I thought, that's just wild, right? CAA and AI just didn't resonate to me. And when he said he is now forecasting the weather, he's forecasting traffic patterns in order to predict where accidents happen. That's pretty mind-blowing when you think of what the CAA does. So I'd like to hear from you in terms of what challenges did you find and how did you overcome them in terms of moving your team forward down that direction, whether it's acquiring the skills, how did you think about that? And then, Michael, from your point of view, how do you view AI inside the LCBO, and where do you think that will move your business? Maybe we'll start with Ken.
That's kind of a tough question, but in our case, the AI component was driven by our CEO. So it really helped from that side to actually make sure that we do have the right product. And you know what? Even though we sort of say, you know what, look, here's where the truck's going to be, or an incident's going to happen. We need trucks here and there. Our business counterpart was actually quite reluctant initially, because they would say, you know what, it works, it has been working. And we said, no, it doesn't work. You're not getting to people fast enough, right? You may think that 45 minutes or an hour was great before. We're saying it's not good. And it's only as we keep showing, iterating, and showing them that, look, here's the stuff. You have truck drivers who's actually sitting in there, where, you know what, the incident is just right there, like 3 minutes away or a kilometer away, and they're sitting around and not moving anything. It took a long time to actually convince. For us, it's also helped because our CEO was applying a lot of pressure on them. Like, he was really on our business operations folks to actually push to make the change. The same tool is actually also being used by another AAA club now, and they've also are seeing the change, the benefit of it. Other areas where they are not actually making changes into the business process has been, they're saying, yeah, we like it, we see some stuff, but we don't want to make some of these changes. Thinking about the tool itself is like, it's the concept, like it's mind-boggling, like you said, to sort of say, you know what, how can we start predicting where incidents going to happen? How are we going to acquire these resources to help to do that? That is a challenge that we still have, and our team from that side is relatively small, but it's some of the pieces that we're trying to push across our organization. And on top of that, you have to have clean data. If your data is not clean, you're going to have garbage data, and you're going to predict stuff.
Yeah, there you go. It's an eternal challenge, right? Clean data. Michael, from your
I
point
would
of
just
view.
add, our challenge is really on the skill set side.
Okay.
Ken's point is bang on regarding the data. I think we all have it. It's the folks that are going to analyze it and do something with it. That is a very, very challenged area. And especially for, again, folks in our domains where we're competing against, the Googles and the Apples that can afford and attract and retain, this talent. And if you're going out to get a service, that can be very, very expensive. So I think for us to really get our arms around this, we'll need to make an investment that, is something that's sustainable for us to really take advantage of that space.
And the other thing I want to add is, in our case, we're hoping that, in our case, it's my CEO and myself who's been working on it. So we're very down into the detail of that. So by doing that, we're hoping that we can actually attract people to the organization, as opposed to say, you know what, you can go to Google and find all the stuff, go to Facebook and all that. So, but we are quite technically savvy as well.
Yeah. All right. So maybe 1 minute each, 30 seconds. Any kind of final comments on digital transformation? Any key learning that you've had you want to share with the audience? We'll start over here with Phil.
I think, I don't know about you guys, but my struggle is education of the business about what digital transformation is, and then trust, education and trust. So if you're the CIO, if you can educate and you build the trust, those two things, then you could probably move forward in a very real way with the business to lead some really phenomenal digital transformation for the organization. So those are the two pieces I think I would say.
Yeah, the only thing I would add is, based on today's definition of the transformation that includes AI and cloud and all that, I think everyone needs to figure out, where it will be applicable, where it will be practical in your organization. I mean, again, I use the example all the time for us in retail. I'd love to hear someone give me a good use case for, blockchain in retail. I still haven't seen it. So, you really need to figure out, where and when these technologies are applicable in your organization.
I guess I think it stands on one thing. It stands on people. Getting the right people to understand the business, and it's not just people who have technical knowledge, but it's people who actually have technical knowledge, but also wanting to understand the business, because that's key. So it starts with the people, because once you have the right people in place, then you can have clean data, then you can have the right technology in place.
Very good. No?
Well, I am thrilled to have participated in this panel. This is just a great group of CIOs. But I would want to add the concept that innovation is one of the new rules of the game that's being played. And the unique thing that IT brings to the table is integrating innovation into the at-scale operations. The line of business do not want to do that. And to me, that's the real success. If I can move an innovation into something in a mission-critical environment that's supporting a mission-critical part of my business, that's achievement. And that's the part, when you get into that bimodal discussion, they completely ignored it. But it's innovation integrated into the at-scale operations.
Very good. Well, I thank you, our panelists. Thank you very much. You've been very enlightened.